In Catholic tradition, the phenomenon of incorrupt bodies has always been regarded as something extraordinary. These are saints whose remains appear to resist the natural process of decay, preserving an almost lifelike appearance for many years after death. For believers, this is not simply a difficult physical phenomenon to explain, but also a spiritual sign of holiness and the presence of God. Famous cases such as Saint Bernadette in Lourdes and Saint Catherine Labouré in Paris have long astonished both people of faith and researchers alike. Many who have seen these bodies in person describe the experience as incredibly powerful, a rare encounter that forces them to reconsider the boundary between science, faith, and things beyond human understanding. Today, we will explore 11 of the most famous incorrupt bodies in Catholic history. Stories that are both astonishing and deeply thought-provoking, inviting reflection on faith and the mysteries surrounding human existence. Number 11. Saint Bernadette of Lourdes. If you've ever been intrigued by mysterious religious events from history, the phenomenon of incorrupt saints is probably one of the most compelling subjects you can explore. And among the most famous examples is Saint Bernadette Soubirous, the young girl whose visions in Lourdes, France, transformed one small town into one of the world's most visited pilgrimage sites. Bernadette was only 14 years old when she claimed to see a woman dressed in white appearing inside a grotto near Lourdes. Although she had very little formal education, she consistently described the figure with remarkable clarity. According to her testimony, the woman spoke to her in Occitan, the regional language Bernadette understood best. At first, local authorities dismissed the visions with skepticism, but everything changed after Bernadette said the woman instructed her to dig into the ground near the grotto. Soon afterward, a spring began flowing from that exact location. Reports of unexplained healings quickly spread, and thousands of pilgrims eventually traveled to Lourdes hoping for physical or spiritual healing. When Bernadette died from tuberculosis in 1879 at the age of 35, she was buried in a convent in Nevers. Years later, during the official exhumation process, those present expected to find little more than skeletal remains. Instead, they encountered something that shocked everyone in the room. Her body appeared remarkably preserved. Her face, hands, and feet still retained recognizable features despite decades underground. Witnesses described her skin as dry, yet unusually intact, and her body reportedly remained flexible. Additional examinations in 1919 and 1925 continued to show minimal signs of decomposition, adding even more mystery to the case. Today, more than a century later, Saint Bernadette's body remains displayed inside a crystal shrine at the chapel of Saint Gildard in Nevers, France. Pilgrims from around the world still visit the site, many saying she appears almost as if she were peacefully asleep. What makes the story even more controversial is that her body was reportedly never embalmed using modern preservation techniques. For believers, this strengthens the argument that her incorruptibility may represent something supernatural. For scientists, however, possible explanations include unique burial conditions, low oxygen levels, and environmental factors that may have slowed decomposition naturally. Whether viewed through the lens of science or faith, the story of Saint Bernadette remains one of the most remarkable mysteries in Catholic history. From the visions at Lourdes to the body that time itself seemingly struggled to erase. Number 10. Saint Francis Xavier. Among the many saints associated with incorruptibility, Saint Francis Xavier stands out as one of the most widely recognized cases. Beyond his reputation as a legendary missionary, the condition of his remains centuries after death continues to astonish visitors and researchers alike. Born in Spain in 1506, Francis Xavier became one of the founding members of the Jesuit order and spent much of his life traveling throughout Asia spreading Christianity. He journeyed through India, Japan, and other distant regions during an era when long-distance travel often meant extreme hardship, illness, and constant danger. Historians estimate that his missionary work influenced the conversion of more than 1 million people before his death in 1552 on Shangchuan Island, near China. Yet one of the most extraordinary parts of his story began only after he died. When his body was exhumed in 1614 for transfer to Goa, witnesses were stunned by its condition. Reports claimed the body remained unusually flexible, almost as though death had occurred only recently. Although the skin had darkened and tightened over time, many internal structures and facial characteristics were still recognizable. For Catholics of that era, the preservation of his body was interpreted as a sign of divine favor and spiritual holiness. Even more surprising, Later examinations over the following centuries reportedly showed little additional decomposition. Today, St. Francis Xavier's remains rest inside a silver casket at the Basilica of Bom Jesus in Goa, India. Although the body has become darkened and dried with age, its level of preservation still shocks many who see it in person. Medical inspections conducted as recently as the 20th century reportedly found no evidence of artificial preservatives or fungal contamination, leaving experts with few clear answers. But perhaps the true power of Francis Xavier's story lies beyond the mystery of his body itself. He spent his life crossing oceans, enduring disease, isolation, and exhaustion in pursuit of what he believed was a divine mission. Centuries later, both his legacy and the mystery surrounding his remains continue to inspire millions around the world. Number 9. Saint Catherine Labouré. Growing up, you may have heard stories about Catholic saints connected to extraordinary events, miraculous healings, unexplained visions, or bodies that seemed untouched by time. One of the most fascinating among them is Saint Catherine Labouré, the humble French nun associated with the famous miraculous medal. But what surprises many people is that more than a century after her death, her body still appears remarkably preserved. Born in France in 1806, Catherine eventually joined the Daughters of Charity, dedicating her life to caring for the poor, the elderly, and the sick. In 1830, while living in Paris, she reported a series of visions involving the Virgin Mary inside the chapel of her convent. According to Catherine, Mary revealed the design of what would later become known as the miraculous medal, an object now recognized by millions of Catholics around the world. What made Catherine especially unusual was her refusal to seek attention, even after the medal spread globally and countless believers credited it with spiritual comfort and answered prayers. She continued living quietly, avoiding recognition for the vision she claimed to receive. When Catherine died in 1876 at the age of 78, she was buried in the cemetery belonging to a religious order. Decades later, in 1933, church officials ordered her remains exhumed as part of the process examining her life and holiness. What happened next stunned everyone involved. Instead of finding a body consumed by time, witnesses reported that Catherine's remains appeared astonishingly intact. Her body looked peaceful, almost as though she had simply fallen asleep. Soon afterward, her remains were transferred to the Mother House Chapel in Paris, the same location where her visions reportedly occurred. To this day, millions of visitors continue traveling there to pray and see her body resting inside a glass shrine. Even after more than 145 years, many observers say her facial features still appear natural and calm, while parts of the body reportedly remain flexible. Church examinations over the years have stated that the preservation was not the result of modern embalming techniques. For believers, this has strengthened the idea that Catherine's incorruptibility represents something far beyond ordinary science. For many Catholics, Saint Catherine Labouré's story is not simply about an unexplained body. It is about a woman who lived quietly, served faithfully, and left behind a legacy that continues influencing millions long after her death. Her preserved remains are seen as a reminder that humility, faith, and compassion can leave an impact far greater than fame or recognition ever could. Number 8. Saint Veronica Giuliani. Throughout history, countless people have been fascinated by Christian mystics, individuals who claim to experience visions, supernatural encounters, or deep spiritual phenomena. Among the most extraordinary is Saint Veronica Giuliani, a woman remembered not only for her intense mystical experiences, but also for a body that reportedly resisted decomposition centuries after her death. Born in Italy in 1660, Veronica entered the Capuchin Poor Clare Monastery while still very young. Life inside the convent, however, was far from peaceful. She endured severe illnesses and harsh treatment from religious superiors who believed extreme discipline was necessary. Despite the suffering, Veronica remained devoted to her faith. According to historical accounts, Veronica experienced vivid visions connected to the suffering of Christ. Some reports even claimed she displayed stigmata, physical marks resembling the wounds of Jesus. She also wrote extensively about her spiritual experiences and inner struggles. But not everyone believed her. At a time when religious authority was dominated almost entirely by men, several church officials became suspicious of Veronica's claims. She faced repeated interrogations and accusations that she had fabricated her experiences. Considering the constant illness, emotional pressure, and public doubt surrounding her life, many people today wonder how she managed to endure it all without losing hope. Eventually, attitudes toward Veronica began to change. Her writings were examined more carefully, and many within the church concluded that her experiences reflected sincere spiritual devotion rather than deception. She spent the remainder of her life encouraging devotion to Christ and mentoring younger nuns inside the monastery until her death in 1727 at the age of 66. Centuries later, when her remains were examined, another mystery emerged. Witnesses reported that Veronica's body appeared extraordinarily well preserved. Even nearly 300 years after her death, her remains continued to be displayed inside a shrine at the monastery in Città di Castello, Italy. Scientific examinations performed in modern times reportedly found very limited signs of decay. Her skin and facial structure remained recognizable, leaving preservation experts struggling to explain the phenomenon through ordinary environmental causes alone. What makes Veronica's story powerful is not just the mystery surrounding her body, but the resilience of her life itself. She endured physical suffering, suspicion, humiliation, and isolation, yet remained deeply committed to her faith. For many believers, her story stands as a reminder that holiness is often forged through endurance rather than comfort. Number 7. Saint Virginia Centurione. For those interested in forgotten figures from religious history, Saint Virginia Centurione is one of the most remarkable, yet lesser-known examples connected to the mystery of incorruptibility. Her story combines personal suffering, extraordinary compassion, and a discovery after death that left even investigators stunned. Born in Genoa, Italy in 1747, Virginia experienced hardship early in life. After losing her mother, she was raised by relatives who reportedly treated her harshly. Yet despite rejection and emotional pain, she developed a deep commitment to helping others. At only 16 years old, Virginia began working with charitable groups connected to St. Vincent de Paul. She devoted herself to assisting the poor, visiting prisoners, caring for the sick, and helping abandoned children, often using her own limited resources to do it. Even as her own health deteriorated, she continued traveling to hospitals, orphanages, and shelters wherever people were suffering. Those who knew her described a woman whose compassion seemed endless. Tragically, Virginia died at just 36 years old after contracting typhus while caring for infected patients. Her death devastated the local community, many of whom viewed her as a living example of selfless charity. Nearly 200 years later, during the process connected to her beatification, officials exhumed her remains for examination. What they reportedly discovered shocked everyone present. Her body appeared unusually preserved, with recognizable skin, joints, and internal structures showing minimal signs of decay. Subsequent investigations reportedly failed to identify clear natural explanations for the condition of her remains. Today, pilgrims continue visiting her shrine in Genoa, where her relics remain an important symbol of compassion and sacrifice. For many believers, Virginia's story serves as a reminder that acts of kindness can outlive a human lifetime. Long after physical death, the impact of mercy, faith, and service continues to shape lives in ways that history itself cannot erase. Number 6. Saint John Mary Vianney. When people study the lives of saints, it's often not the miracles that leave the deepest impression. It's the compassion they showed toward ordinary people. Few examples capture that better than Saint John Mary Vianney, the humble priest who became known around the world as the Curé of Ars. While extraordinary stories surrounded his life, it was his mercy toward struggling souls that truly defined him. Born in France in 1786, John Mary Vianney faced major difficulties from an early age. He struggled academically and had trouble completing his studies, especially during the chaos following the French Revolution. Because of these obstacles, he did not officially begin seminary training until he was 26 years old. Many doubted whether he would ever succeed as a priest. But despite every setback, Vianney refused to give up. Through persistence, prayer, and determination, he was eventually ordained in 1815 and assigned to the tiny village of Ars, a place where religious practice had become weak and neglected. Few could have imagined that this quiet village would one day become one of the most famous spiritual destinations in Europe. Father Vianney devoted himself completely to the people under his care. He spent countless hours hearing confessions, offering counsel, and celebrating Mass with extraordinary reverence. Historical accounts claim he sometimes remained inside the confessional for 12 to 16 hours a day, even during harsh winters, listening patiently to anyone who came seeking guidance. What drew people to him was not fear or strictness, but compassion. Rich or poor, educated or forgotten, everyone was welcomed with the same gentleness and understanding. Pilgrims eventually traveled from all across France simply to speak with him and confess the burdens they had carried for years. Even as his reputation spread, Vianney remained deeply humble. Witnesses described him as physically exhausted from years of sacrifice, yet completely dedicated to prayer and service. Some accounts even claim people saw him lifted from the ground while praying alone late at night. Stories that only added to the mystery surrounding his life. When St. John Mary Vianney died in 1859 after decades of tireless ministry, more than 20,000 mourners attended his funeral. Yet the fascination surrounding him did not end there. Over time, reports began spreading that his body had remained in an unusually preserved condition. To this day, his remains are displayed in Ars, France, where pilgrims continue traveling to seek comfort, prayer, and spiritual encouragement. Witnesses have described his body as remarkably lifelike, showing surprisingly limited signs of decay despite the passage of more than 150 years. For many Catholics, this incorruptibility is viewed as more than a physical mystery. It is seen as a reflection of the holiness and selfless love he demonstrated throughout his life. Some visitors even claim to notice a sweet fragrance surrounding the shrine, something traditionally associated in Catholic history with the odor of sanctity. Whether interpreted spiritually or scientifically, the story of St. John Mary Vianney continues to resonate because of the life he lived. His preserved remains may attract attention, but it is his extraordinary compassion, humility, and devotion that continue inspiring millions around the world today. The mystery of incorrupt saints remains difficult to explain. In many cases, science has struggled to fully account for why certain bodies appear preserved while others naturally decompose. Some believers view these cases as visible signs of divine intervention, while others see them as rare biological anomalies that science has yet to fully understand. Stories connected to figures like Saint Nicholas of Tolentino or Saint Charbel Makhlouf only deepen that fascination. In Saint Charbel's case, reports claimed his body emitted a sweet fragrance and even secreted a mysterious liquid associated by believers with miraculous healings. Whether accepted as miracles or mysteries, these stories continue provoking curiosity centuries later. And perhaps that is why incorrupt saints continue capturing attention today. They force people to confront questions about death, faith, and the possibility that not everything in human existence can be fully measured or explained. Number 5. Saint Teresa Margaret of the Sacred Heart. Among the many incorrupt saints honored within the Catholic Church, few inspire as much fascination as Saint Teresa Margaret of the Sacred Heart. Her story is remarkable not only because of the condition of her body after death, but because of how brief and spiritually intense her life truly was. Born Anna Maria Redi in 1747 in Arezzo, Italy, she entered the Discalced Carmelite order while still very young. From the beginning, she devoted herself entirely to prayer, sacrifice, and a quiet life centered on God. Unlike famous public figures or missionaries, Teresa Margaret lived almost completely hidden from the world. Yet after her death in 1770 at only 23 years old, something extraordinary reportedly occurred. When her tomb was opened a decade later, witnesses claimed her body appeared astonishingly preserved, as though she had only recently fallen asleep. Observers described her face as peaceful and recognizable, with features that seemed untouched by time. One detail especially shocked those present. Her body reportedly remained flexible. In many historical cases involving preserved remains, the body becomes rigid or hardened over time. But accounts surrounding Saint Teresa Margaret claimed her limbs could still move naturally, adding even more mystery to the phenomenon. For believers, this incorruptibility became associated with the holiness of her life and her deep spiritual devotion. Historical writings describe her as someone intensely committed to prayer and strongly influenced by the mystical teachings of Saint Teresa of Avila. Many Catholics believed her unwavering love for Christ played a role in the preservation of her remains. Visitors to her shrine have also described another phenomenon often associated with incorrupt saints, the scent of roses reportedly surrounding her remains. Within Catholic tradition, such fragrances are sometimes referred to as signs of sanctity, symbolizing purity and spiritual grace. Today, Saint Teresa Margaret's body remains enshrined at the Carmelite monastery of Santa Maria Maddalena de Pazzi in Florence, Italy. Pilgrims continue traveling there seeking comfort, healing, and spiritual inspiration. Over the years, numerous believers have attributed personal miracles and answered prayers to her intercession. At the same time, the Catholic Church has consistently emphasized that incorruptibility alone is not proof of sainthood. Many holy individuals never experience this phenomenon, while cases of preservation remain rare and difficult to explain. Instead, incorruptibility is often viewed as a mysterious sign connected to certain lives of exceptional devotion. The story of Saint Teresa Margaret ultimately goes far beyond the mystery of her preserved body. It is the story of a young woman who completely surrendered her life to faith, prayer, and love for God. Centuries later, her memory continues inspiring countless people to pursue lives shaped by humility, devotion, and spiritual purpose. Number 4. Saint Rita of Cascia, born in Italy. In 1381, Saint Rita lived during one of the most unstable and violent periods in the country's history. From a young age, her life was marked by hardship. She entered into a difficult marriage and reportedly endured years of emotional pain and abuse. Yet despite everything she faced, Rita remained deeply committed to her faith, turning constantly to prayer for strength and peace. After the death of her husband, Rita eventually entered the Augustinian convent in Cascia, where she devoted herself entirely to contemplation, service, and spiritual discipline. Those who knew her described a woman deeply committed to forgiveness, compassion, and reconciliation, even after enduring years of suffering herself. When Saint Rita died in 1457, she was buried in the convent cemetery. But years later, when her tomb was opened, witnesses claimed something extraordinary had occurred. According to historical reports, her body appeared remarkably preserved, sparking immediate fascination among the faithful. News of the phenomenon spread rapidly across Italy, and pilgrims soon began traveling to Cascia hoping to witness the body for themselves. For many visitors, standing before the remains of Saint Rita became a deeply emotional and spiritual experience, one that strengthened their faith and sense of connection to the divine. Over time, however, natural changes did begin affecting portions of the body. Parts of her face and hands gradually became mummified. In order to preserve her appearance for future generations, caretakers placed a wax covering over her face and protective coverings over her hands. Even with those changes, Saint Rita's body remains one of the most recognized incorrupt saints in Catholic history. She is especially known as the patron saint of impossible causes, and countless believers throughout the centuries have claimed answered prayers and miracles through her intercession. Today, the shrine of Saint Rita in Cascia continues attracting pilgrims from around the world. Many visit not only because of the mystery surrounding her body, but because her life itself speaks to endurance, forgiveness, and hope in the middle of suffering. Her story remains powerful because it is ultimately about transformation. Despite pain, betrayal, and hardship, Rita chose faith over bitterness. For believers, her incorrupt body stands as a visible reminder that grace can endure long after earthly suffering has ended. Number 3. Saint Nicholas of Tolentino. Saint Nicholas of Tolentino was born in Italy in 1245 and became one of the most respected religious figures of the 13th century. During his lifetime, he gained a reputation for intense fasting, charitable work, and stories of miraculous events connected to his ministry. After his death in 1305 at the age of 82, his body was entombed at a basilica connected to his religious community. Over the following centuries, church officials reopened the tomb multiple times to examine the remains, and each time, reports described the body as astonishingly preserved. Witnesses claimed that his skin, muscles, and even internal organs still appeared present long after death. Some accounts describe the body as soft and flexible, with limbs that reportedly remained movable despite centuries passing since burial. One detail especially fueled fascination around the case. During an examination in the late 19th century, more than 550 years after his death, observers claimed his tongue still retained a reddish appearance, resembling living tissue. Stories like these helped turn Saint Nicholas into one of the most talked about incorrupt saints in Catholic history. For many believers, the preservation of his body is viewed as evidence of extraordinary holiness. Skeptics, meanwhile, continue searching for natural explanations involving burial conditions and environmental factors. But regardless of interpretation, the case remains difficult to ignore because of how extreme the reports appear compared to normal human decomposition. Even today, stories surrounding Saint Nicholas continue attracting curiosity from historians, pilgrims, and visitors fascinated by mysteries connected to faith. His preserved remains remain one of those rare phenomena that seem to exist somewhere between documented history and the unexplained. Number 2. Blessed Pope Pius IX. After hearing stories about incorrupt saints from centuries ago, many people are surprised to discover that one of the most famous modern examples involves a pope, whose remains are still preserved beneath the Vatican itself. That figure is Blessed Pope Pius IX. Born in 1792, Pius IX served as pope from 1846 until his death in 1878, making him one of the longest reigning popes in Catholic history. His leadership shaped a major era within the Church during a time of enormous political and social change across Europe. When he died, his body was initially buried in the Vatican grottos beneath St. Peter's Basilica. But during restoration work a few years later, Church officials reopened the tomb and reportedly discovered that the body remained unusually intact. According to witnesses, his skin, muscles, and internal tissues still appeared preserved only a few years after burial. Some accounts even claimed the limbs could still move naturally during the transfer of the body to a different tomb location. Stories surrounding the transfer became even more controversial when eyewitnesses reported seeing liquid emerge from the body during movement. Details that only intensified public fascination with the phenomenon. For the Vatican, the preservation of Pius IX became associated with his spiritual devotion and long service to the Church. For others, it remains one more example in the long history of incorruptibility cases that challenge ordinary expectations about death and decay. Today, visitors beneath St. Peter's Basilica can still view the preserved remains of Blessed Pope Pius IX. More than a century after his death, his condition continues to provoke both reverence and curiosity among those who encounter the story. Number 1. Saint Charbel Makhlouf. Among all incorrupt saints, few modern figures inspire as much fascination as Saint Charbel Makhlouf of Lebanon. Known during his lifetime for intense prayer, solitude, and spiritual discipline, Charbel became one of the most beloved saints of the Middle East. Born in the 19th century, Charbel lived as a Maronite Catholic monk and priest, dedicating himself almost entirely to silence, fasting, and contemplation. He died in 1898 at the age of 53 after suffering a stroke. But according to reports, the mystery surrounding him only began after his burial. When church officials examined his remains a little over 2 years later, they reportedly discovered that his body showed almost no signs of decomposition. Witnesses described the body as flexible and well-preserved, with internal organs allegedly still intact. Following the examination, Charbel's body was dressed in fresh monastic robes and permanently placed inside a marble tomb. What makes the case especially unusual is that later inspections reportedly continued finding the remains in a remarkably preserved condition decades afterward. Even during examinations conducted in the 20th and 21st centuries, observers claimed the body still appeared largely unchanged aside from some yellowing of the skin. These repeated accounts helped turn Saint Charbel into one of the most famous incorrupt saints in the modern Catholic world. Today, Saint Charbel rests within Saint Maron Monastery in Lebanon, where pilgrims from around the world continue traveling to pray and seek healing through his intercession. Although visitors cannot directly see the body itself, devotion surrounding him has only continued growing over the decades. For believers, Saint Charbel's incorruptibility represents more than a medical mystery. It symbolizes a life so completely devoted to prayer and spiritual surrender that even death itself seems unable to erase its impact. And whether viewed through faith, skepticism, or simple curiosity, his story remains one of the most extraordinary in the history of incorrupt saints.